In this section, we're going to be looking at components, which are one of the most powerful features of Vue.js. Components let you encapsulate reusable code that is self-contained. We'll be using components extensively throughout the rest of the course, so this is an important section. For the first couple of lectures, we'll still be working within JS Fiddle, but soon we're going to switch to the setup that we saw in the previous section. But wait a minute, couldn't we just use a Vue instance with a class selector to place it multiple times on a page instead of adding a component? No, actually you can't, but let me just quickly show that to you. So within the app element here, I'll just add 2 divs and I'll duplicate this one. So notice that they have a class of test, and then I'll just go ahead and add a new Vue instance. And for the elements, I'll say .test to match the elements that I just added, and add a template with an h1 element. And in here, I'll output a message. And of course, I need to add the data property and define the message key. Now let's try to run it. And actually it doesn't work because I misspelled message here, so I'll just run it again. And now notice that the message only shows up once, since the Vue instance is bound to the first element that matches the CSS selector. So that clearly didn't work, so I'll just remove this example again and go back to square one. So instead, let's create our first component, which will be a very simple contact us widget. So down here for the JavaScript code, we can register a component on the global Vue object by using the component method. And as its first arguments, we have to specify a string, which is the tag name that we'll use to use this component. So in this case, I want to use the contact us tag. And the second argument is an options object. Now notice that for the tag names, you should prefix it with something specific to your application, for example app. And this is to avoid name conflicts, for example with third-party libraries. Now the object that we pass to the component method is almost identical to what we have previously passed to Vue instances. One difference though is that the data property must be a function returning a data object. We'll be taking a look at why this is the case in the next lecture, so for now let's just add the function. So adding a data property as we've seen before, but this time it has to be a function. And this function should return an object. And this object just corresponds to the data objects that we've seen before. So in here I can add an email property with a value of info@mycompany.com. As for the template, I will add an inline template within the component, and later in this section, we'll move to working with single file components. So I can add a template property exactly as we would do with a Vue instance. And here I'll use the ES6 backtick syntax for the string so that it can span across multiple lines. And I'll add a header here saying contact us, and a paragraph saying please send an email to, and then use string interpolation with the data property of email. But actually I need to make a slight change here, because I need to add a wrapping div element, and I'll get back to why this is the case in just a moment. So this div probably looks redundant, but it's actually required by Vue.js. This is because each Vue component must have exactly one root element, otherwise it simply won't work. And in that case, we would see an error in the console. Now we're not done yet with this component. We need a root Vue instance, which will control our template, so let's create one as we've done so many times before. So new Vue, and an object. And here I'll simply use the EL selector, as we've done so many times before, and point it to the app element. So this Vue instance will now control the app element, and since we have already registered a component, we can now use this component within this element. We do this by using the tag name that we just specified, in this case being contact us. So up here in the template I can use this tag name. So contact us, just like that. And if we run the code, we should see our components template being rendered. The cool thing is that we can now use this component as many times as we want. So let's just try to add it to the template one more time. Like this, and I'll refresh the code. And now we'll see the component being rendered twice. And these two component instances are actually self-contained. So if we change the data property in one of them, it won't affect the other one. And with that, we have successfully created our first Vue component. Let's now see exactly why we need to use a function for the data property instead of an object as we've done so far.